All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Workbench, your resource rich weekly podcast and newsletter, continuing our conversation in the world of franchises, franchise platforms, buying a franchise, starting a franchise, you name it. We have Adam Wasch here, who's a founding partner at the franchise firm. They specialize in supporting franchisees, franchisors, I think, as well in their journey. So, Adam, you've been front row seats to a lot of the franchise transactions that folks listening may one day want to do themselves or perhaps are thinking about doing or in the middle of doing. So you're going to be, I expect, a wealth of knowledge on all things franchising. So I want to dive into the nitty gritty with some specific questions and get into the details. But before we do that, Adam, always good just to get, level set with the audience and kind of who you are and your background and your business. So if you don't mind just kicking it off with a little intro and background, then we can dive into the specifics.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me, Brian. The franchise firm is a uh, national franchise law firm. We represent franchisors, mostly startup and emerging brands. Probably have about 100 brands in our portfolio, with a few new ones coming online every month. We also represent franchisees, obviously, in a lot of different capacities. One being in acquisitions. That's sort of my bailiwick. We represent prospective franchisees getting into new brands as well as resales of single units, multi units, etc. So we sort of see it from both sides. We're there to support our clients on both sides, and certainly have a good 365-degree view of the industry, working in the manner that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the franchise firm, I had my kind of one of the probably few lawyers that started their own firm, then went to a national big firm, and then back to having my own firm. So,
Yeah.
I grew a boutique firm, mostly franchise was certainly my area, but did that for about 8 years, based out of South Florida. Represented, franchisees and franchisors through that firm. Then moved on to a national firm, started up their franchise practice, and met my or recruited my partners who are with me at the franchise firm at this large firm, and we decided to split off and do our own thing at the end of 23, and so the franchise firm was born.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to play the role of the layman here. I've become much more familiar with the business of franchising through my software company, Lead Truffle, because we serve franchises, and so it's forced me to learn about the industry. But before that, as just an everyday American consumer, when I thought of a franchise, I thought of like Subway or McDonald's or just like these big conglomerates that I guess someone in your area can elect to open. You're a lawyer, you've been around the franchise world for a while. Like, what is it about the business of franchising that got you interested in spending your life working with these type of entrepreneurs? And like, what is your just kind of read on franchising as a business model? Because there's a million other ways to build a business. Like, you could buy it, you can start it, you can just be an employee. Like, I'm just curious to hear like what is your and like, yeah, how do you read the franchise business model and industry as someone who's been in the game now for a while?
Yeah, I'm very big into processes, operations, systems, and I really appreciate businesses that have solidified their operations. And so, when I started, we represented a few big brands. We're representing Tropical Smoothie at the time, and a couple other.
Grew up on Tropical Smoothie. That
Yeah,
was my jam. I think my sister actually worked there back in the day.
yeah, they've been through a couple of billion-dollar rounds of funding,
Yeah.
but we represent the original founders and their emerging brands currently, based out of Destin, Florida. But yeah, so I got intrigued by companies that were a replicatable model, and um, learned the ropes through serving as outside counsel to some decent sized franchise companies, learned the ropes, got really integrated with the businesses and the owners and the founders, and it just got it became exciting to me when were we were involved in the franchise closings and kind of expanding the footprint of these brands into areas that they had never been, through multi-unit deals and that sort of thing. So it sort of morphed from there. And then, as we became more well known in the industry, we started to attract the startup founders that were looking to do the same thing with their brands. So, we had a good story to tell that we had represented the tropical smoothie founders, pretty early on, not at their infancy, but pretty early, and saw that through to their ultimate first sale. And so we started working with some really cool brands in a different variety of industries, and our startup and emerging brand franchise practice really took off in about I'd say the year 2015, 16, thereabout. So we've been at it for a good solid decade now. Put out a lot of cool brands, and just learning about the inner workings of the businesses, and being able to develop the franchise program around it is really what interested me.
I think one of the most common tropes you hear in business and entrepreneurship is like, don't start a restaurant. Like, food is very hard and challenging, and you have a product that goes bad, and the margins are razor thin. And now I know there's a separate topic I want to get to is how like franchising is this model, but there's so many different types of franchises. You have a dog daycare, you have a smoothie spot, you have a coffee shop, you have so many different types of business. You have home services franchises, which we primarily work with. But everyone says like don't start a restaurant, but it seems like a lot of the biggest franchises are food related. So someone who's worked with, big companies like Tropical Smoothie, like why do you think it is the case that the mainstream narrative will be like don't start a restaurant, but then food franchises seem to be like amazing big businesses? How do you balance those two?
Yeah, I mean, even though I'd say you start a franchise, there's still some risk, right? But at
Yeah.
least you're starting with the playbook.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say starting a restaurant is certainly a risky game. You're usually leveraging, you know, some debt. Obviously, you're taking on debt. You're signing a long term lease, which comes with personal guarantees. You're mortgaging a house or a property. There's just a lot of risk factors that go into restaurants, which traditionally the mom and pops just don't make it for a long period of time. It's a very low percentage. I don't know the percentages, but obviously, starting with the playbook, you got to know which playbook you're getting into, and certainly with the influx of new brands, there's um, good playbooks and not so good playbooks. But once you have that, and you believe in the brand and their mission, and you're able to validate the past success, the proven track record of success, I think you're starting off on a really, uh, uh, I would say, less risky level, by going with a franchise versus starting up your own business.
When you look at a new single unit business, and stop me, do you work with single unit businesses that want to turn into a franchise?
Yes.
Okay. When you're looking at one of those, like, what are three non-negotiable traits you need to see to say, yeah, I believe in this and I'm happy to work with these folks?
Yeah, I'd say strong branding, uh, being one of the main priorities. Having obviously a federally registered trademark, being known in at least a region of the country, and having good brand awareness. Number two would probably be more than 12 months of success. I'd like to see, frankly, 2 or 3 years at least of success, with profitability, showing that the system works. I do like when brand owners diversify, not only um, uh, territorially, but they maybe invest more money into either developing a different region if it's a service brand, or a different area of their general vicinities to see how another business would work in a different area. If it's a brick and mortar, I'd like to see, you know, 2 or 3 units in various different markets to get a sense of what's going to work nationally. So that's another one. Then the third, probably just the mindset of the founder. You know, I've dealt with all sorts of personalities. I think the good character traits of a founder are to get into this business for the right reason, that you want to be a supporter of franchisees, that you're getting into this business with franchisees, not against franchisees. And certainly I can identify, you know, the good jockeys of a franchise system as I've done this over the last decade.
Where do you think, where do you think a new, so someone who's listening who's saying, hey, I want to, because we've had people who've started franchises, Roof Resource, Rolling Suds, a few others, Squeegee Guys. When it comes from a franchisee perspective, there's a lot of options, right? For every probably business type you could think of, from window cleaning to a coffee shop to whatever it may be, there's options. Assuming that there's like a highly qualified candidate, they have the capital requirements, they have a really good baseline of operations, and like they're thinking about joining a franchise. What, from that perspective, what are some things they should look for to say, hey, yes, this is worth me investing my time, money, and capital into becoming a franchise of this brand?
Yeah, I have these questions every day with my franchisee investor clients. Some looking at single units, some looking at multi units or multi territorial opportunities. Most of the folks I work with are first time franchise people. You know, they have not had any exposure to the franchise industry in the past, and they, you know, are needing some counsel on what to look for, the risk factors, the red flags. So yeah, I have these conversations every day. You know, I think with the 8 to 10,000 different opportunities out there right now in franchising, it is critical to find the right horse and the right jockey, um,
Right.
to put it into horse racing terms. Um, you know, uh, it's not always easy to identify. You know, sometimes the sales folks that are out there selling for brands and the founders are incredible salespeople, and so they're, uh, but there may not be much behind it. Sometimes they're good operators and good salespeople, but the system itself just isn't something that's been proven to make franchisees money. I mean, that's why people do it. You don't get into franchising to break even. You get into franchising to make a living, you know, build your portfolio. And you'd be surprised at what I hear on a daily basis from franchise sellers, from different brands that are trying to attract franchisees. It's sometimes scary, frankly, with what I'm hearing, and have to, in effect, be the objective voice of reason here. And sometimes the salespeople are so strong that it's hard to overcome.
If I said, Adam, I'm going to give you, what's a reasonable amount of money to start a brand that you'd want to franchise? $1 million?
On the franchisor side,
Yeah.
uh, to start a brand,
Yeah.
um, you know, I'd say it's probably less, but I mean, you're talking about starting a brand and operating it for a year or two to, you know, understand the business and build it and then franchise it. But okay, you know, let's play with that budget.
Yeah. Let's say I gave you $1 million, Adam, here, July 2025. You have to go make a franchise concept successful. What concept from all of the stuff you've seen would you pick? Dog daycare, coffee, window washing, HVAC. I'm curious what you'd pick and why.
Great question. You know, I do like the service brands. I do think there are quite a few out there, and certainly some have had success, and some have not for franchisees. I do like the low investment and high upside of a service brand. in the trades. But I think those businesses need to have a very strong digital marketing background, a very strong plan to go to market for franchisees. Hit the ground running and really blow it up. Um, I, my answer is probably going to be strange, but I do like the food concepts. I mean, I think if I had to do it, I'd probably pick some sort of. I mean, it's hard. There's so many. I tell people that if there's an idea, I've represented that type of brand.
I got
So
an idea for you when you're done. So I want to
yeah,
hear your option. Let me give you a good one, an
yeah.
idea
I
I've
mean,
had. So go ahead.
yeah. I'll give you my top three. My top
Yeah,
three would be,
we'll take three.
say chicken, number one.
Just
Uh,
like a rotisserie chicken, or what are we talking here?
yeah, I like the idea of like healthy family meals
Hmm.
and I don't think there's many options for that, frankly, out there. There's a little small brand in my area called CR Chicks that I really think is if they built it the right way, could be a big thing, kind of like a smaller Boston market, if you will,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, which obviously had its time.
Oh, Boston Market back in the day, that was my spot. Love
Yeah,
Boston
yeah.
Market. Yeah,
Me too. I think my dad took us there like weekly on our family dinners.
dads love Boston Market. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Something about that generation.
Yep. So I like that idea, and maybe a smaller footprint with high quality, healthier foods. Um, Number two would probably I do like the dog space. I represent a couple of brands in Senhound and Dog Drop that are doing really cool things.
Love Dog Drop. They're a customer of my software companies. Shane is the best.
Yeah, she's fantastic and just a really super smart and motivated founder. So, we love working with her. I do like that arena. I think people spend absurd amounts of money on their pets and
Preach. Yeah.
and certainly I do like the dog space. Third, education is really a just tried and true model. There are a ton of investors looking at buying these, more bigger footprint schools like, Primrose, Goddard, those sorts of schools. And then there's a bunch of smaller brands out there that, if I, with the right operator, I'd love to really get into that space. And I do think that people, again, there's always a demand for children, children's educational services. And I do like the, the space. So,
Hmm. Chicken, dogs, books. That's what I'm hearing. Those are the three.
the best I can do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's so many different concepts, and I certainly represent a lot of brands that are doing some amazing things in all the different industries. But if I had to pick three, those are the top three that I would play with.
Here's my pitch. I be honest. Shark Tank me right here for the audience. Uh I'll get my idea shot down for the audience here. Ready? Bread and butter. Now let me explain. I recently got into making homemade sourdough bread. Like I'm 5 years late to the trend everyone's doing during COVID, but it's all good. I'm here. I'm making homemade sourdough. If I made it myself, it's pretty good. It's pretty good sourdough. And then we made whipped butter and like put some garlic and crunchy sea salt on it, and it's just a hit. It tastes delicious. I don't know anyone unless you're on a specific diet that doesn't like bread and butter. And so all we do, you come in and there's like a couple different types of artisanal sourdough loaves. So you have a savory, a sweet, and then there's a bunch of different butters, garlic herb butter, cinnamon sugar butter, and you buy your loaf and you get, a quarter to a half pound of butter. And that's all we do. Call it bread and butter. Boom. $1 billion idea.
$1 billion idea, but we'd have to do the trademark search to see if that's available.
True.
But
Yeah, that's going to be the problem.
happy to help you. Yeah, no, I like the idea. I like simple, small footprint. Um, you know, being having the best of something, is to me better than doing a lot of things average. And just as just to expand on that, I see some of these brands that were developed as being really good at something being almost forced to add whether it's a med spa forced to add modalities, whether
Mm,
it's a, service brand forced to add different services because the whatever the revenue isn't there for franchisees with the main driver. Um, and so yeah, being the best at something for me, if you can prove that model out, that's I'm with you.
all right, let's do it. We'll circle back after the call and get the FDD in place. Speaking of, yeah, go ahead.
I'll need a taste test first.
Oh yeah,
So
I got, yeah. Love is coming down to North Carolina. So, the FDD, that, as again, I'm newer to the franchise world again through my business. I'm now realizing like the FDD is sort of this like holy bible of the franchise, right? In the sense that it like kind of guides things. So, and stop, correct me if I'm wrong after I ask the question, but like it seems like the FDD is really the governing document that dictates the franchisee and the franchisor's relationship. Like, where do you see the best brands in terms of how they manage, obviously providing process and best practices and guidance to the franchisee versus letting the franchisee do their thing? Like, is there a balance? Is more guidance better? Is less guidance better? Kind of where do you land on that spectrum?
yeah, so the FDD is the disclosures that are going to advise the franchisee on the investment.
Okay.
And there's 23 different items of information. A lot of it, you see one FDD, you see them all, but there are some places to look in the FDD for an investor that are of critical importance. The first being item 2, you get to see who you're dealing with. Item 3 and 4, you get to understand whether there's been a lot of litigation or bankruptcy history with the brand. Item 5 tells you about the initial fees. Item 7 gives you an idea of the initial costs and what you really need to budget to have, whether you're going for an SBA loan or just self funding, what the range of investment's going to be. Item 19 is the financial performance representations. That's obviously important to people to know how franchisees or the corporate locations are performing. And then item 20 is important to see the brand growth. So those are the key aspects of an FDD that if I'm an investor, I'm looking at. And certainly I walk my clients through every item and on an in-depth
Mm.
uh, walk through to give not only the objective, what it says, but also my experience and my thoughts. The franchise agreement is what governs the relationship between the parties. That's an exhibit to the FDD. And that is usually very one-sided, just traditionally one-sided in favor of the franchisor. Usually doesn't give too many secrets away because those documents are actually public and can be found on the Wisconsin franchise database, the California franchise database.
Both the FDD and the franchise agreement are public. They have to be.
Well, they're only public if you are actually registering the brand in that state. So
Understood.
the states that are public include uh, 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 Minnesota, Indiana, California, New York. Actually, Maryland and Virginia now have a database through the EFD, and then you've got Wisconsin being probably the most often used and easiest to access and find what you need. Brands are reluctant to give away the special sauce within the FDD. The processes and the manual and the um, standard operating procedures, how the franchisee is going to really govern or operate or sorry, control your operations, or through what's called an operations manual or a brand standards manual, something like that. And that's usually kept under lock and key and not exposed to the public. And most brands require some sort of confidentiality agreement, both in the franchise agreement and when they receive the operations manual. So, that is what brands have put out there. Some brands have a real robust manual, and of course, the mature brands have thousands and thousands of pages of how to operate a QSR, for example. But brands that are coming online that are newer startups, you really need to understand what they have developed, and sometimes it's really, frankly, not that much with respect to procedures, processes, systems, and you really don't find that out until after you've signed the franchise agreement and committed to that relationship, and probably paid an initial fee.
Got it. Yeah, it's interesting that all that's like publicly available. I was, while we're talking here, looking at some of the stuff you mentioned, and it's like just kind of out there for people to find. Um, got it, Adam. So in terms of like, just your view here, let's pull it back a second because we kind of are at the intersection of technology and sort of, because most franchises, correct me if I'm wrong, they're like local businesses in nature. They're like, very human to human. They're sort of geographically constrained in this era where everything's about AI, everything's about digital, we're on our phones more than ever. I feel like franchises are this beacon of light and like, no, like being in your community and being like near certain businesses still matter. Like, how do you think about like the value of franchising and these types of specifically businesses you need to, these are not Netflix. No, you can't Netflix franchise Netflix. You can't, franchise Google. Like these are local in nature. How do you think about the value and the staying power of these types of businesses as things continue to become more digital, more AI, more online?
Yeah, I think brands need to have a plan. Obviously, franchise agreements are traditionally 10 years or more. And so every day we're seeing advances in AI right now across the board, especially in professional industries and service industries with regard to, call centers and intake
Yeah.
and leads and getting, doing marketing pieces. I mean, everyone's using ChatGPT or whatever program they are using to put out content.
Yep.
So I think there needs to be a coherent plan um, for starters, but certainly franchise will not be immune to AI, and there are certain industries that are more prone to uh, AI is coming after you, and it's just reality. And franchisee investors and brands need to realize that. And certainly, if I'm on the franchisee side and advising an investor on looking at a brand that I feel is susceptible to some sort of automation that might impact revenues, I'll do the research and advise them on that and what it could look like in 5 years. We don't even know what the world could be
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
different years, and you're not even halfway through your franchise agreement. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to know what the plan is, and but I, I'd say a lot of the industries that are traditionally franchised, whether it be food or service brands, it's still a people business. And at the end of the day, I feel like franchise, for the most part, is as safe as any other industry from AI takeover. I may not be safe as a lawyer. I don't know, you know, but from a people to people business of service or of um, providing education, dog care services, uh, hairdressing, nails, all the people to people business. I think
Yeah.
we're in the short term pretty. Hopefully, I'm right. AI proof.
Yeah, that would be my first instinct is that these local business like yeah AI robotics may one day come mow the lawn, but we're not quite there yet. So I do think these more local in nature businesses with a real world component are more defensible than obviously certain software businesses or other digital businesses. So Adam, thank you for coming on. And anything we didn't get to here that you wanted to cover?
No, and I appreciate you having me. I hope I was able to espouse some knowledge to folks that are both looking to maybe start up a franchise or invest in a brand. Happy to serve as a resource to
Yeah.
either side. And I do enjoy speaking about franchising. So you might hear the same thing from me if you just gave me a call, my direct line. I'd probably pick
Yeah.
up.
Well, Adam, for people that do want to connect with you on, the website, your website, your social media handles, if you're active on there, what's the best ways for people to check in with you and the franchise firm?
Yeah, I'm very active on Twitter at Adam G Wasch ESQ. That's AdamGWASCHESQ. You can find me on the web at thefranchisefirm.com and my email, adam at thefranchisefirm.com. Uh, Pretty responsive. Shoot me an email, give me a call. Happy to chat franchising with anyone.
All right, Adam, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.